Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Panel Jumper LITE. My name is Ben Lawrence. With me, as always, is the Panel Jumper himself, Mr. Cole Hornaday. How are you, Cole?
Hey, Ben, doing fine. Little muggy,
Yeah,
little swampy,
it's
but you know,
it's a scorcher out there today
yeah.
in the Great North. Great North. I almost said North Left. I hate that. That's on one of my Bumbershoot shirts. That was their tagline one year, and I'm like, whatever. Yeah, it was the record for this day at SeaTac Airport, where they keep the official temperature recording, is 95, and today we hit 94. So not
Oh,
quite a record, but close enough.
uh, see, it's really a pain when you're a short, squat troll person in the heat because we have less surface area to express the heat. You know, tall, skinny people like you're actually in much better shape. You know, you got less ballast. You've got more surface area to express, and I know you hate this kind of weather too, but just for the sake of competition, because you and I both are just such terribly competitive people, I'm suffering more than you are.
Well, I
No, but
also
you
like
did tell me
you have
that.
no problem wearing shorts. I don't wear shorts. I just wear I always wear black jeans. It's not like I'm not trying to be cool. It's not a thing. It's just what I'm most comfortable in, even in 95-degree weather. Um, yeah.
Well,
So
hey, pal, you're making the assumption that I'm actually wearing anything below my midriff.
I asked you that during the live streaming show, and I'm not going to ask you that now. But
Oh,
speaking of clothes, something that I ordered for the live streaming show finally came in. The T-shirt that I
oh,
ordered for
yes! You got your
I
mask
got my
T-shirt.
mask
That's
shirt.
great.
I bought it
Good
from
for you.
a place called 80s Tea, which I recommend. You know, they have a bunch of great stuff and their customer service is great. But if you want to order something for an event, make sure you order it a month out, because this came in like 3 days ago, and yeah, I was a little taken aback at how long it took to get me this.
Well, an 80s tee, they're not. Do they do custom T-shirts, like custom designs, like T Fury and places like that? Are they only doing um, vintage decals and stuff like that? Do you
They
know?
have they have an extensive collection. Their shirts are custom printed. That's why this
Yeah.
took so long, is because like it got put into the queue. It's not like they can just pull it off the shelf. So, so yeah, hey Cole, we're back doing the Panel Jumper Light. This is the thing that we're doing
Yeah.
because
Whatever.
we're
Talking about your T-shirt, buddy.
I know,
All right.
because sorry, I am, as you can see, in Annex Theater right now, and there's a fire truck going by because the
Oh,
fire department's that way. When we stopped doing the podcast, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Cole and I thought that we'd still like to maintain community and connection to our audience and do something like this. It's not quite the podcast, but speaking of the podcast, good things are in the works. And if you're not already subscribe to the Perfect Bound podcast, subscribe. You know, we're silent now, but I'm pretty sure things are going to happen in the near future.
so do we want to mention what our friend Chris Casso is doing right now with his creative energy?
Absolutely. So one of the things that Chris is doing is he created a Patreon called the Trusty Henchman, and I have to keep reminding myself it's Henchman and not Henchmen.
Singular.
Trusty
It's
Henchman.
a. I can't remember. Did he had his comic book critique site for years and years, and maybe I'm misremembering. I thought it was henchmen plural, but it could be henchman.
It
Anyway,
may have been at one point, but
all right,
on the email I got today, I double checked. It's Henchman.
definitely. So he's regularly he's kind of picking up the slack from the Comics Dungeon rant newsletter that he would put out once a week. Of course, there's nothing to do with the shop because the shop doesn't exist anymore, nor does Corner Comics. But he's still doing reviews and he's still promoting Kickstarters and other worthy projects of note and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. And I think you can just go to the Trusty Henchman on Patreon or on, I think he's got a Facebook page too, and click the link to subscribe to that. And you can subscribe to his Patreon for just a nominal monthly fee, like $5-10. But right now, let's bear in mind that a lot of our friends in the industry don't have jobs anymore. So this would be a really, really great way to support Chris and if you have the wherewithal, find other such resources as well. So yeah. And it's great for me because I've always just poached all my panel jumper links of note off Chris's newsletters anyway. It's good for me.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
know. For this today, a couple of the things that we're going to talk about, I actually poached from his newsletter that he sends every Monday. He's as the manager of Comic Extension, he sent the Comic Extension rant every Monday, and he's keeping that up. So subscribe to Trusty Henchman on Patreon, and you will still get your Comic Extension rant, so to speak. It's rebranded, but it's essentially Chris doing the same thing. And
yep.
not only does he post articles that you and I would find to talk about, but he's now posting original articles. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was something that he linked to himself, his own website, and that is that Chris Ryle, who is the former, I guess, president, publisher, and chief creative officer of IDW, is starting a new thing, a new publishing venture. And he's stepping down from IDW. And this new publishing venture is called Syzygy? Syzygy.
I used to know how to pronounce that.
It's spelled
Syzygy.
Syzygy.
It is the term comes from an astronomical Real.
I thought it was Ryle, but I don't know. It's not like I'm king of pronunciations.
Neither am I, but he's a frequent collaborator with Ashley Wood, and the Ashley Wood does the zombies and robots and monsters and robots, and is a really, really unique artist who's kind of just done their own thing. There are a lot of zombies and robots. There's a couple of anthology collections that both of them collaborated on, but Ashley Wood also designs these really expensive and hard to come by designer action figures and statues of his artwork that come out of a lot of these stories that they did together. And there's no way in a month of Sundays I could ever afford to buy one of these toys, but gosh, they're beautiful. Just highly stylized, very unique cloth, elongated bodies, little heads, very like the robots are really unique. I wish we had pictures to show off the robots. Just look up Ashley Wood robots, and you will not be disappointed. In fact, you will probably be frighteningly intrigued.
And I have to apologize to you, Cole. I just realized that when I cut to a solo of you that we lost your audio, so I apologize for that. But I believe that issue is fixed right now.
Well, everything I have to say is so profound, so that's a real crime against humanity when you did that. Did you do it again?
Yeah, I did, but we were able to hear you that time.
Can you hear me now?
I can. So anyway, no, there's no updates. Since then, there have been, Chris says on Trusty Henchman, there have been no updates until July 18, 2020, where a blog post title simply states, Sizz is about to wake up. So
okay. I'm not familiar.
No, well, it's a new one. But speaking of things that you are familiar with, the Transformers are going to team up and meet Back to the Future. Are the Transformers the new Archie comics of the comics world?
I guess. Well, it's IDW and whatever, because they're collaborating with IDW, and it seems to me a lot of those really, really loopy and silly, but apparently incredibly satisfying crossovers are all coming out as a result of this IDW license. But sometimes they just get super, they seem super, super silly. I am not a fan for a number of reasons because let's face it, when you do a goofy crossover like that, it's really never going to challenge the status quo, because the X-Men Star Trek crossover was never going to challenge the status quo. They were not going to blend. Neither was Archie and the Punisher or Archie and Predator or all these things. But every once in a blue moon, there would be one that was really wild and out of left field, like Batman and Elmer Fudd. And that was like, because now that Warner owns all of or no, the DC Warner owns everything, but Warner owns DC obviously. So they started putting these Warner characters together. It was like Martian Manhunter and Marvin the Martian and things like this that sounded really preposterous. But I do highly recommend that Elmer Fudd Batman story because it's dark, it's gritty. It's not Batman trying to adjust to living in Elmer Fudd's cartoon reality. It's the other way around. And it's an Elmer Fudd that exists in this noir-ish, Tim Burton style, grim and gritty murderverse of Zack Snyder kind of thing. Anyway, I thought it was refreshing and wild, and I kind of dug it. Yeah,
I did read one of the Transformers crossovers where they met Star Trek, which I enjoyed that. That was pretty fun.
And what happened?
They beat the bad guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and everybody learned a lesson.
That's really all that matters.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not gonna change how the stories are told going forward, but they beat the bad guys, and that's yeah.
So
maintain the status quo.
We have a question on Facebook. I guess this is for you, Cole. Whiskey or apple juice?
Ginger ale.
Special
ginger ale.
Alrighty. So look for that in your comic book store if you're into.
Yes.
Back to the Future. I enjoy the movies, but I wouldn't say I'm interested in reading serialized stories from that world. I don't know. It just doesn't appeal to me.
Sometimes I look at these crossovers before I move on to the next one. One of the things that occurred to me is like, how would I tell this story? Because from the get-go, I'm like, would I even do this story justice? What happens? How would I bring Doc and Marty together with Optimus Prime and these characters, and how could I justify it? How would you do that, Ben? How would you put these people together in a context, and what kind of story would you like to tell with them?
Well, I don't know, because what universe do the Transformers occupy? And can the DeLorean travel through the multiverse as opposed to just through time in one single universe of Back to the Future? You got to buy into a lot if you want to think that Back to the Future verse is the same as Cybertron verse. So I don't know. Somebody figured it out. I mean, who is it? Cavan Scott, who wrote IDW's Star Wars Adventures, is writing it, and Juan Samu is the artist on the book. So if you want to know how to do that, then you can read it. All right, this next topic, I get the feeling that you have some thoughts on this because we were talking about it before we went live.
So what's this one?
So this is comic creators and some media cut ties with Dynamite Publishing due to Comicsgate affiliation. This takes a lot of understanding of a backstory, but essentially what it boiled down to was Diamond, like the official Diamond Twitter, retweeted or promoted something on their Twitter of somebody who is entrenched in the Comicsgate controversy. And
right. So we don't have the time or the space here to sort of share all of the falderall that's happened with Comicsgate, but and I do encourage everybody to go and look up articles about it. But essentially what it boils down to is that there is a faction of the comic book creative community that have sort of been marked as a hate group. And there are some well-established artists who actually established the names for themselves in big part in the bigger publishers, and improving themselves to be through social media to be bigoted, racist, misogynistic. And now that we live in a cancel culture, there are a lot of people being very, very public about the fact that, well, if you are going to associate with this artist, then I will no longer work with your organization. And this most recent one was Mark Russell saying, I will no longer be writing the Red Sonja comic book because of your company, because of the Dynamite Red Sonja comic book, because of your association with creators who are associated with Comicsgate. And if you remember Mark Russell, I actually have I've sung praises of for years because he was the writer of Flintstones DC comic book, which I couldn't stop talking about for a while, and also the Snagglepuss Exit Stage Left or Exit Stage Right. I can't remember. I think it must be Stage Left because there's lefty stuff in it. Sidebar. I'm kind of surprised that he's writing something like the Red Sonja comic book, which is just, you know, barbarian TNA, but who knows? Maybe he brought something new to it. At any rate, he noted on his social media that after this last issue he's penned, he's not going to be associating with them anymore. Last week, Tom King, who's another writer that I frequently declare what a terrific writer he can be, not always, but he can be, and he's accomplished some really great things, was upset and proceeded to cancel Jay Lee. And Jay Lee is an illustrator who did an alternate cover or a limited edition cover, incentive cover for the new Rorschach DC comic. Now, in both cases, and Jay Lee, unfortunately, has no foreknowledge of what Comicsgate is, took the gig, but doesn't realize that people in the public are making this connection with him. And it sounds like Tom King was well on the road trying to cancel this artist without any foreknowledge. He publicly apologized, but that also that raised a lot of ire with a lot of people. So it's really sad. It's really, really sad to me that our culture, our comic book culture, our so many pop culture communities are polarizing like this in really toxic ways. And I'm very disappointed that Tom King had such a knee-jerk reaction on social media. It's like not directly communicating with anybody, just saying this person is connected with these people, they are bad, I'm canceling them, and then having to recant it rather.
Right. So yeah, it's a bad situation, and no word yet on Dynamite's response. Like,
Yeah,
I don't see where they've addressed any of this.
I've never been a big Dynamite fan because I've always I tried for years, but the work that came out of Dynamite was in my mind so terribly mediocre, and it's clearly catered to my age group as an old nerd in comic fandom. I was clearly their target audience, but I was so bored with what they were doing, and I thought so much of it was really kind of tasteless and not particularly innovative. So I have no idea. I think probably a good idea would be for them to speak up sooner rather than later, but it doesn't look like that's happening.
There is one title from Dynamite that I've read recently, and that's The Boys, because I enjoy the Amazon TV show, and I thought I'd give the comic a try. And it's quite enjoyable. It's Garth Ennis.
But the thing about The Boys is, remember, I think it got kicked out. That book got bounced from publisher to publisher because it was just like pushing too many buttons and boundaries, and wound up at Dynamite because they weren't going to.
Obviously, they don't care
bat an eye about the gore and the violence and whatever.
Yeah.
The themes.
Right. So I forgot to tease this at the beginning, but we have a special video we're going to be showing. Not quite yet, but I want to talk about it. For those of you who actually saw the live streaming show we did a couple weeks ago, we had a sketch where Cole and I purported to call a man who was selling monkeys through the phone. And of course, it was a sketch. We didn't actually call them, but ordering monkeys from ads in the back of comic books was a thing. And my friend Paul Goody, and a frequent collaborator, was the man on the other side. And the way we generated the content for that was we basically just let Paul improv. And then we massaged it and fine-tuned it and came up with the final product that you see. But essentially, how we started was we got on a Zoom call with Paul and basically just let him go. And it was some of the funniest stuff I'd heard. I'm building it up too much. It's really funny. We're going to play.
No, you're not. You're not building it up too much. There were points where, and maybe you're not going to get what we're experiencing, but it was, there were several sessions where Paul just went wild because that's in his toolbox, is his creative wildness and his gift for extemporizing. But there were points where I could not breathe. I could not. I mean, you see me at one point get up and walk away from my camera, but there were points because this was a process that took us a while.
Yeah.
I could not breathe. I have not laughed that hard since I can't even begin to tell you, and that's sad. I need to laugh more. We all need to laugh more.
And that's coming up. But before we do, Cole, do you have one more thing you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about a recent rediscovery I made. So, as some of you know, I've been a longtime reader of the Fortean Times. And as some of my more intimate friends know, I stockpile these things because I don't have time to read them. They're dense magazines. So since the pandemic started, what a great way to get caught up on like practically the last 2 years of unread issues. So this is the November 2019 issue. And I came across a really, really great article on a weird fiction writer from the turn of the 20th century named William Hope Hodgson. And it's this lovely article about Hodgson's creative work. He was not, he wrote back in the early 1900s, and he was an inspiration to H.P. Lovecraft and many of the weird fiction writers who came later. But I'm going to encourage you all to like try to find his work. Yeah, some of it's out of print, but it's not expensive. Some of it is actually shown up in comic books, in comic book form. And one of his more famous novels called The House in the Borderland in 2000 was adapted by my favorite Richard Corbin as an illustrated novel, beautifully illustrated novel. And you read this and you go, well, this feels like H.P. Lovecraft. I'm like, well, it's 30 plus years before Lovecraft actually was published. This, I tell you what, I've read the novel of The House in the Borderland, and I've clearly read the graphic novel adaptation a couple times. I think this is better. I think it's more linear. It's a very surreal and dreamlike and nightmarish story. This version of it makes more sense. But also, if you can track these down, you do yourself a service and find a collection of Carnacki the Ghost Finder, and these are early Ghostbusters stories, and they are written with a critical eye to the supernatural, because Carnacki is not. He's not sold on spiritualism. He's not sold that these hauntings are real. He's actually going in trying to disprove them, and some of the stories are left. You're definitely like, we're dealing with the supernatural here. Other times they're fabrications. Really fascinating stuff, but so ahead of its time. And if you're a hardcore reader of Alan Moore, and if you've read the back matter to some of his League of Extraordinary Gentlemen books, Carnacki actually is a character that shows up every once in a while in those Alan Moore League of Extraordinary Gentlemen stories. Also, there's this weird little travelogue called Nightland. This is a copy from Ballantine, printed back in the 70s. Like I said, everything is out of print, but some of them are not super expensive. I got this book at a clearinghouse for like $1.99 online. So William Hope Hodgson, and because I am always thinking about H.P. Lovecraft and his inspirations, and how we are still trying to figure out how to negotiate H.P. Lovecraft. And it reminded me that, hey, by the by, gang, HBO's adaptation of Brad Ruff's Lovecraft Country is the series is going to be popping up in August. But also, our friend and companion, Emmett Montgomery, recently published a link to a really, really cool podcast called Imaginary Worlds. And one of the more recent ones, and if you go to the Panel Jumper Facebook page and scroll down, one of the more recent Imaginary Worlds podcasts is a discussion with Black horror storytellers and marginalized storytellers from marginalized communities, talking about how they negotiate telling stories in Lovecraft's world and what we do with the advanced and toxic misogyny and racism in Lovecraft stories, and why do we still hold on to them, and why do we still care? And there's some great discussions with some Black horror story authors, scholars, and folklorists. And I think it's really, really worth your time to listen to it. The whole podcast itself is really inspiring for storytellers, and that's the point.
I can't help but wonder how many people are going to experience Lovecraft for the first time due to HBO, the popularity of HBO's TV show.
I'm wondering about that too. It's going to be interesting. What I love is how so many artists of color are reworking it. I can't speak highly enough of the efforts of our friend and local playwright Maggie Lee. I mean, she's written a number of H.P. Lovecraft inspired stories and reworked them from her perspective in really, really challenging ways. Yeah, I hope it's not a really rude awakening for some folks to go, hey, I want to read H.P. Lovecraft. And because some of it's just such bald-faced racism, yeah. It's nauseating. It's really nauseating.
Cool. Anything else, Cole, before we get to the video?
No, I think I've rambled enough. Thank you for indulging me. You're all terrific and lovely, and you're great friends.
All right. So, this was basically we just got on the phone or got on the Zoom with Paul, and we told him that we wanted to do a call with a guy who was selling monkeys out of Florida. And here he is just riffing through some ideas. Here we go.
You know, these monkeys, they don't really have hobbies so much. Unless you call eating an entire bag of Fig Newtons and then just running around the room shitting everywhere a hobby. But you can name them whatever you want, and they won't come when you call them or anything, but at least you'll have something to yell at them when they bite you, which they do a lot. This is the thing that kind of, I have sort of a confession to make. I used to have a lot more monkeys. Then I went on vacation, and I thought what would be good for their own like amusement, mental well-being, whatever, is get a really big cage and just put them all in there so that they could, talk to themselves or whatever. But the problem is when I came back, I'd forgotten about them for like a good week. And now there's only one left. And I'm trying to sell him. We've got one monkey left. But you could technically say it's the best one. He's missing a couple of things. Here's the thing. I will send him to you. And this isn't a threat, but it's sort of a threat. I will send you what I'm terming the ultra monkey. Before I went on vacation, people weren't ordering them, so I was just sending them to people. And most people don't want a monkey, and so they return it. But the thing that you need to understand is that we give them enough food and water for the trip out there. The trip back is a little bit harder. And so what happens after that? I don't know. People have talked about a monkey fight club. Don't know anything about it. People suggest that Post Office Monkey Fight Club got their name from an actual thing. I had ordered one of these monkeys, but besides getting the monkey, I got a trip to the factory, the monkey factory. Okay,
the monkey factory.
And they brought me here, and it was great. It was like an internship, and then I turned 18, and the owner just handed me the keys and left. And said, and I quote, "It's your problem now." And it was. So here's the other thing we're not going to talk about.
Right.
We're not going to talk about people eating the monkeys at all.
Okay.
Because I think that is not something that I condone. All I know is that there's a guy in Wisconsin who buys at least 3 monkeys a week. So here's the problem with selling monkeys through the mail. They're hurt a lot of repeat customers.
Well, what's your name?
Tony Greystoke. No, that's the I don't go by my human name anymore. I have a monkey name now. That's basically.
So
the genius of Paul Goody. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you can see our glee in that. And I mean, we were with Paul. We spoke to him probably in total hour and a half, 2 hours. And there's so much more stuff, but that's basically the gist of it right there.
You did a great job of parsing going through that and parsing all that out. And notice that he's walking around his home. I'm assuming he's got his phone and he's recording it. He wasn't carrying his laptop.
No.
But he's just extemporizing. This is how brilliant Paul is, in that the best thing we could do to say yes and to Paul was to be quiet, maybe throw an idea out every once in a while, but not get in his way. And seriously, I think I mentioned earlier, I could not breathe. Were I a little bit further down the road in my deterioration, I probably would have been wetting myself. Yes, you do need to know those things. It was that funny.
Your friend of mine, Danny Chong, on the comments says that he's calling PETA now.
Of course he is. But the monkeys aren't real. So Ben and I have been figuring out how, we've been doing a little bit of brainstorming about how we want to do the next Panel Jumper live streaming. And we definitely want to try and figure out how we can make this a thing with Paul. Maybe always culling from those messed up ads from comic books, because there's so much material there to mine. So great work, Paul. Great work with the editing there, Ben.
Oh, well, thank you. So unless you have anything else, Cole, I think it's time to call this one off.
Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have to share, and that would be no.
All right. Well, we have another one of these planned for next Monday at 7 p.m. And it probably won't be so blisteringly hot in Seattle, but maybe it will be. I don't know. Certainly affects me here in this hot box of a theater. Although I did have the air conditioning on earlier, and it does cool the place down when it's running, but I didn't want the sound on, so I turned it off.
Sure.
And this room heats up
you're suffering
fast.
for your art, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. So thanks again for watching and putting up with our ramblings. We're doing this again next week. Be sure to like the Panel Jumper on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, all that fun stuff. And be safe, be well, and we will talk to you next week.